So I'm going to read you another excerpt from the letter that Martin Luther King wrote from the Birmingham jail during the Birmingham direct action nonviolent campaigns there, to try to, not try, because they did at least succeed in an initial sort of way, to have integration at lunch counters, restrooms, parks. And so this is 1963, and these are Martin Luther King Jr.'s words. But though I was initially disappointed at being categorized as an extremist, as I continued to think about the matter, I gradually gained a measure of satisfaction for the label. Was not Jesus an extremist for love? Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Was not Amos an extremist for justice? Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Was not Paul an extremist for the Christian gospel? I bear in my body the marks of the Lord Jesus. Was not Martin Luther an extremist? Here I stand. I cannot do otherwise. So help me God. And John Bunyan, I will stay in jail to the end of my days before I make a butchery of my conscience. And Abraham Lincoln, this nation cannot survive half slave and half free. And Thomas Jefferson, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. So the question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists we will be. Will we be extremists for hate or for love? Will we be extremists for the preservation of injustice or for the extension of justice? In that dramatic scene on Calvary's hill, 3 men were crucified. We must never forget that all 3 men were crucified for the same crime, the crime of extremism. 2 were extremists for immorality and thus fell below their environment. The other, Jesus Christ, was an extremist for love, truth, and goodness, and thereby rose above his environment. Perhaps the South, the nation, and the world are in dire need of creative extremists. Those are the words of Martin Luther King Jr., Reverend King. And so I like to use the word radical love, radical peace, radical acceptance, radical kindness, radical forgiveness. And if you look those, if you put those in as keywords on Google, I don't point to myself because I don't think that I've had to be tested at any of those things very deeply. But there are those who have lived them, who, if you type those words in, radical love, radical acceptance, radical forgiveness, you will find examples of people of great courage and great humility who chose those things. And I was listening to Matt Kahn the other day, and he said this before, but he said it again in a talk just from this weekend. this week, that we need to be as crazy with our love and as people who are choosing to do wrong and to do harmful things are crazy. We need to be that crazy. He doesn't use the word crazy. I'm not sure what word he used, but he was talking about rising to how big and how like a juggernaut of behavior and action in love and in forgiveness, and even thanking people. He was talking about thanking people who have been in your way with harm, because he said those people showed you who you are. You became who you are because of the things you've had to pass through, and we're all teachers of each other. He has a way of explaining that I cannot, and I'm linked to that. But to rise up to a full measure of love and spread it like a flood on the earth. And it's not necessarily easy, but it's easier than we think it is. It's just that most people won't even enter the possibility. That's what I think. I think people won't even enter the possibility. It's too embarrassing, for one thing. It's embarrassing to love that much if we're not used to it, because we're likely going to be the only person in our family or in our community that will do it, unless we get with more people who think like we do. But then there's, that's not always the people that need it. I mean, we all need it, but it's important to be the one in the middle of people who don't get it either, because those are the people that need to be loved and loved and loved and loved again. And there is a part, if you're coming from weakness, there's a stage you have to go through where you have to stand up for yourself and do good for yourself and protect yourself first. Because if you don't know how to do that, if you don't know how to be good to yourself, you can't be good to other people. But after a while, when you get used to radically loving and radically forgiving yourself, the next stage that you can go to if you want, you don't have to, is to the things that are hurtful out there no longer become hurtful to you, because you're just so strong, and you see people as their actions and their words and their thoughts are their own misery that they're in, and it has nothing to do with you, and you understand that. You don't feel it coming towards you because you feel it as being the fire that they're in, and it doesn't come to you as harm anymore. And even things like even things that are technically hurtful, like maybe getting hurt physically or something. Not that we have to stand in the way, but some people do. Some people go stand in the way because they want to rescue those hard cases, and they go at risk to themselves, and maybe they might get physically hurt, but it doesn't hurt them in a way that they have to be angry back. There was a woman who was driving home one day in a city, and it happened so fast she didn't really know what was happening, but basically what had happened, she just basically got her face smashed. But what it was a frozen turkey, and some teenage boys, or at least one, was up higher on a crossover road, up high on a bridge, and was throwing down a frozen turkey. And I don't even know if he'd thought his way all the way through about whether it would hurt someone that bad, but she got her face shattered. But she found that young man, and she forgave him, and I don't know all her emotions she went through, but it wasn't even that hard for her. I'm not saying it didn't have some hard things in it, but that was the first thing she thought of. I'm going to go find that young man. I'm going to tell him that I forgive him, and maybe I'll be in his life so that he doesn't feel like the only fun he has is throwing frozen turkeys off a bridge on people, I think there's another story where a man who his wife died because of a drunk driver. And at first he was very angry, but when he chose to apply radical love and radical forgiveness, it was not easy, but he went and visited the man who had a wife and children, and it was a younger man. They had a young family, and he started to become part of their lives, and to the point where they are family now. And when the young man who had killed his wife had another baby, they named the baby girl after that man's wife. And there are stories like this. I love these kind of stories. So look them up. And it can be done. And so let's go that direction as much as we can. And be extremists for love, as Martin Luther King Jr. tried to do his whole life. And I'm sorry, I was going to finish, but I have one more thing to tell you. Because it was during this Birmingham campaign. There was a city commissioner, his name was Bull Connor, and he would set the hoses and the dogs and the policemen on the peaceful protesters. They went through days of this, and then they were arrested and put in jail, except there were thousands in jail, so there got to be where there wasn't room in the jails. And finally, the segregationist leaders of the community, not Bull himself, I don't think he ever really, but some of the business communities, because they were being affected by the boycotts. But nobody was buying at their stores anymore as part of that campaign. And it took them a long time to break down. In fact, they didn't until someone from the federal government, a man named Burke Marshall, was sent to Birmingham, Alabama, to try to help them do a negotiation to sit down with each other. So finally, the segregationist business community leaders and Reverend King and his people finally sat down, and of course the object was to meet the black community's demands for integration in jobs and in just daily community life. And the talks were not going very well. But one day the segregationists, of course, who were white, went out to get lunch, but all they could see was all of the black people, and they were just being peaceful. But they just realized in that moment, one of the hardest men just realized, well, I think we can work something out. He just realized that it wasn't going to end. The time was coming. But also with the dogs and the policemen and the arrests, they were always singing. They were singing songs of freedom. Like Kanon says, singing songs of freedom, like whoa, whoa. And so there was, even on the night when there were bombs, they bombed the house of Reverend King's brother, they bombed the hotel room where Reverend King was staying. I think that was the Ku Klux Klan who did it. Reverend King was not there that night, but it was the room where he had been staying at a motel. And the night of the bombings, there was still singing in the background of freedom. And so the only thing you have to ask yourself is if you want to be the one holding the bombs, or if you want to be the one singing songs of freedom. Radical extremism.